Now, I asked the president about these parallel talks that are taking place between Iran and Oman about control of the Strait of Hormuz. And the president told Fox News if Oman gets in the way, we'll bomb the S out of them.
Hello, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Toronto, Canada on August 18th, 2026 for Reason to Resist. As you just saw, Donald Trump has done it again. He has threatened to destroy a country that bends the knee to Washington. You see, Oman actually hosts at least one U.S. military base, as you can see from this map that was published earlier this year by Al Jazeera. In the lower right-hand quadrant of this map, you see the country of Oman and a red dot. That is the known military base. There may be other facilities that are used in some way by the United States military. Now, why would the President of the United States publicly humiliate a country in this vitally important region that is willing to host U.S. military forces? One possible answer is insanity. Another is grotesque incompetence, and yet a third is mind-boggling hubris. These three answers, by the way, are not mutually exclusive, unfortunately for us all. Needless to say, Donald Trump's latest acts of psychotic World Wrestling Federation machismo are not reassuring the international oil and gas markets. And so today in this report, we're going to update you on the looming global energy catastrophe, one that has already begun to unfold, as well as the U.S. government's deepening humiliation in West Asia. Before we get into it, please remember to like and share this video if you find it to be informative. And if you're not already a subscriber to Reason to Resist, please do become one. We are aiming to get to 200,000 subscribers on the 2-year anniversary of Reason to Resist, which is the end of August approximately, and we're almost at 196,000. You can help us to expand our reach by becoming a subscriber. Now, let's get into it. So U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, not the sharpest tool in the shed, in my humble opinion, recently provoked howls of laughter by claiming that the Strait of Hormuz had become irrelevant. And here you can see a report. This was from oilprice.com. No, I may be mistaken about that. I think this is actually the Washington Post, that suddenly the Strait of Hormuz is irrelevant to the U.S. That's the headline. And then in the body of the article, it says, a look at the day ahead in European and global markets. Asian stocks are mostly firmer, blah, blah, blah. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent over the weekend claimed the strait would become irrelevant, that's the word he used, as oil would eventually be redirected through pipelines, giving analysts the impression the White House was trying to wash its hands of the whole affair. Now, there's plenty of problems with this claim that pipelines can replace the Strait of Hormuz as a means of delivering essential commodities from West Asia to markets outside the region. But the more fundamental question is, if in fact the Strait of Hormuz is irrelevant or on the way to becoming irrelevant, why the hell is Donald Trump threatening to bomb the shit out of a country in the region that is friendly to the United States in many ways if it interferes in the opening of the Strait of Hormuz? Predictably, the Wall Street Journal weighed in today on why Trump is threatening to bomb the shit out of Oman. And here's the headline of their piece: why Trump is threatening again to bomb Oman. This is not the first time, as the headline notes, that he's done that. He seems to have a penchant for humiliating the Sultan of Oman. And the subline is, some U.S. officials see Oman as favoring Iran, while others say Trump is lashing out over failures to make a nuclear deal. And in the body of the article, it goes on to say this: I don't think they behave very well, but we'd handle them very easily, just like we do others, Trump told reporters today in the Oval Office. He didn't go into specifics about what Omani officials did that drew his ire. U.S. officials, remember those words, folks, we see them so often in the corporate media nowadays, said the Oman picture was murky. The Gulf country that borders the Strait of Hormuz to the south is in talks with Iran to hold more commercial traffic in the waterway. U.S. officials, there they are again, those nasty, ever-present, unnamed U.S. officials, said those negotiations were progressing and could relieve pressure on the global energy market and higher domestic gas prices. I say bullshit. Whatever is happening between Oman and Iran has nothing to do, as the Iranians have said repeatedly, and the Omanis have not contradicted them, to do with the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. This is a separate matter. They're talking, the Omanis and the Iranians, about the future management of the Strait of Hormuz once it's opened. But Iran has set, as we've discussed in this program many times, quite onerous conditions for the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and they have refused to do so steadfastly ever since Trump's latest shenanigans. And then it goes on to say, this article, there is lingering concern within the administration that Oman could aid Iran in brokering a nuclear deal more favorable to Iran, feeding Trump's anger. This is sheer delusion, folks, okay? There are no nuclear negotiations going on at this stage. I think the chances of the United States and Iran entering into negotiations about Iran's nuclear program, which would require the Iranians to place yet again severe restrictions on their nuclear program, this is not going to happen in my lifetime. If it does, I'll be very surprised. If it happens ever, it probably won't happen in my lifetime, just because the U.S. government, both the Obama, the Biden, and the Trump administrations, all three of them, have proven themselves to be so perfidious and treacherous that the Iranians see no point in engaging in negotiations over their nuclear program. And they have every right under international law to enrich uranium for peaceful civilian purposes and to have nuclear energy, just as the United States does, and just as so many other countries around the world, including the West, do. In any case, it says, the article, Oman is just the latest country to draw Trump's anger for not, in his view, doing more to help end the Iran conflict he started alongside Israel. It's quite remarkable you're seeing this kind of language in the Wall Street Journal. On Sunday, Trump ordered a cut to a joint U.S. South Korea military drill between Seoul, the capital of South Korea, because Seoul, which is the capital of South Korea, wouldn't help pry open the Strait of Hormuz, as if this Republic of South Korea has any power whatsoever to pry open the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, that's outright laughable. If the United States can't do it, South Korea has absolutely no hope of even moving the football 1 inch forward towards the end zone. Now, what I find most interesting about this article is not all this crap from these U.S. officials about Oman's murky picture. I think what's interesting is what the article says about South Korea. And it goes on here and says that Trump said, would you like to give us a little hand? And he said this as he was recounting a conversation he had, according to him, who knows whether this conversation actually occurred, with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, before stressing that the U.S. didn't actually need any help. So he's telling this tiny little country halfway across the world from the Strait of Hormuz, you should give us a little hand. And at the same time, in the very same sentence, he's saying the U.S. actually doesn't need their help. And then Trump, according to Trump, the South Korean leader said, no thanks. And I said, according to Trump, wait a minute. We have 39,000 soldiers over there guarding you from Kim Jong-un, your next door neighbor, and you're not going to help us on a very easy military operation in Iran. That's strange. I mean, we are into, the beyond surreal territory here, folks. First of all, if this was such a very easy military operation, why is the Strait of Hormuz largely closed? And why is Trump even talking to the leader of South Korea, this small country in Southeast Asia, about helping him to open up the Strait of Hormuz? None of this makes any sense. It's literally the ravings of a stark, raving mad World Wrestling Federation macho lunatic. Then the article goes on and says, Trump has also complained that European allies such as the UK and Spain haven't done enough to counter Iran, an extension of his decades-long gripe that allies take more from the US than they give. A debate has raged within the administration about how to handle Oman. So as one might expect, The Guardian, which hates Trump, but for all the wrong reasons, and which is, in my opinion at this stage, very likely nothing more than an arm of British intelligence, put out an article castigating Trump for what he's just done to South Korea. And the headline, as you'll see here, this was published yesterday, August 17th, Trump's move to gut South Korea alliance is a inane, haphazard decision, lawmakers say. And this is drafted by somebody named Joseph Gideon. Don't know who that is. Apparently, he's a Washington correspondent of The Guardian. And he writes that Donald Trump's move to gut Washington's 73-year-old military alliance with Seoul has been called inane and short-sighted, as lawmakers warned it risks strengthening Russia's hand in Ukraine. Not entirely clear to me why that would strengthen Russia's hand in Ukraine, but in any event, the U.S. president abruptly ordered the Pentagon to scale back joint exercises with South Korea just days after North Korea test-fired ballistic missiles, justifying the decision by citing his very good relationship with Kim Jong-un, the nuclear-armed dictator such exercises exist to deter. It's interesting that The Guardian never uses the word dictator to describe bin Salman, the dictator of Saudi Arabia, or al-Sisi, the dictator of Egypt, or the clown, I can't even remember his name, it escapes me now, who calls himself the king of Jordan, but is a dictator of that country. We can go on and on. The United States has supported, propped up, not just the United States, of course, it's the collective West, dictators around the world for the entire World War II period, post-World War II period, and in fact, going back centuries. And so for some reason, you know, our bastards are called kings and princes, and their bastards are called dictators. In any case, the real sort of fallacy of this article is that Trump is not putting pressure. Anybody who's looking at the situation objectively would understand this about Trump, and who's looked at the pattern of his behavior. He's not putting pressure on South Korea by ordering the Pentagon to scale back joint exercises. And by the way, this is meaningless. He's what? He's ordering them to scale back joint exercises. That's not going to change the balance of power in the Korean Peninsula. If the U.S. withdrew its forces, that would change the balance of power. So they're scaling back, you know, they're reducing the extent of military exercise. That's not going to change the situation one iota. But even assuming that it did, the motivation for Trump doing this is not that he's in love with the North Korean so-called dictator. That's not the reason. He hates that man. He may say nice things about him from time to time, just as he occasionally says nice things about Xi Jinping, the leader of China, or Vladimir Putin. He even sometimes says nice things about the Iranians. But that's not the reason why he says these things. The reason why he is supposedly telling the Pentagon to scale back military exercises with South Korea, whatever scaling back means, is because he wants to punish the government of South Korea for not insinuating itself into this insane war of aggression with Iran. I suspect that if Donald Trump was able to overthrow the government of North Korea, because it has, whatever you may think of it, it has unquestionably pursued a line, a set of policies, both foreign and domestic, that are independent of Washington. He would love to overthrow that guy. He would love to crush that guy. Whatever personal feelings he may have about him, he wants a vassal installed in North Korea, just as he wants vassals all over the world. So this isn't about his so-called affection or love for the leader of North Korea. This is about him punishing a vassal because it refuses to get involved in his insane war of aggression against Iran and the resistance forces throughout West Asia. Anyways, despite Trump's theatrics, Iran continues to throttle traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. And here you can see a report published by the Associated Press earlier today that a ship was hit while transiting Hormuz. And Tehran said again that it will not reopen the strait until the U.S. meets its conditions. Now, it is true, based on all information available, that some ships are getting through the Strait of Hormuz, including ships that are not necessarily cooperating with the Iranian military. But that doesn't really tell us much. What the question really here is, the one that should concern us all, those who want to avoid a global recession and quite possibly a global depression, is how much traffic is getting through the Strait of Hormuz relative to pre-war levels, because the world had become dependent and relied upon the passage through the Strait of Hormuz, not only of oil tankers, but also cargo ships, vessels carrying LNG, vessels carrying other commodities like helium, aluminum, urea, fertilizer, sulfuric acid. It had become reliant on stable levels, large stable levels of exports through the Strait of Hormuz. So the question is, how does what is getting through the Strait of Hormuz now compare to what was happening prior to this war of aggression? And all credible evidence points in the same direction, and that is that there continues to be a drastic reduction in traffic through the Strait of Hormuz of all kinds, because Iran will repeatedly and has repeatedly struck ships that refuse to seek the approval of the Iranian military before transiting the strait. And that's really all Iran has to do. It has to cause a dramatic reduction in traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, and it doesn't need to actually prevent any and all traffic from entering the strait in order to achieve its military and its economic objectives. Now, but while this is all going on in the Strait of Hormuz, Yemen's Ansar Allah continues to batter Saudi Arabia. And here you can see a report on the oilprice.com website by Tsvetana Paraskova. This was published today. The Iran-aligned Houthi group, that's really not their correct name. It's Ansar Allah. Houthi is an ethnic group. Ansar Allah is a political movement that currently controls the capital and a large swath, the most populated area, in fact, of Yemen. So Ansar Allah claimed it targeted Saudi Aramco's Jazan oil refinery on the Red Sea coast in southwest Saudi Arabia in what was the third attack at the facility in the past 2 weeks, amid escalating hostilities in the region and a deadlock in the U.S.-Iran talks. The armed forces of the Yemen-backed quote-unquote Houthi group targeted the Jazan refinery with a number of drones, a military source told the Yemeni news agency Saba. The strike at the refinery was precise, the source said, adding the facility was targeted in response to the violation of Yemeni airspace over the Sada and Haja governance. This is a major Saudi Aramco refining facility, which for some insane reason, the Saudis, it's a state-of-the-art facility they built just north of the border of Yemen while they were, crushing Yemen with an inhumane blockade, and they were effectively in a state of war with Ansar Allah. And after this facility was struck several weeks ago by Ansar Allah, the Saudis announced that they were going to close it until August 15th, I should say. That date came and went, and just before it arrived, they were hit again at Jazan, the refinery, and they said, okay, we're going to make it August 30th. Now, who knows? Who knows if and when this facility will be open and functioning at prior capacity, because as the Ansar Allah forces can do all too easily, they continue to strike this facility in retaliation for the fact that Saudi Arabia continues to use mercenaries to attack Ansar Allah in Yemen, continues to impose an inhumane genocidal blockade on the country, and continues to support illegitimate forces, proxy forces inside Yemen who claim to be the legitimate government of the region. And you can see also here, this is not the only actions that Ansar Allah has taken against the Saudi dictatorship, because that's exactly what it is. They also have inflicted more damage on the mercenaries, the Saudi-backed mercenaries who are currently on Yemeni territory. This is a report on the Iranian news agency Tasnim, published today. Yemeni sources report the occurrence of massive explosions in the city of Marib after the Yemeni army targeted the gathering of forces affiliated with Saudi Arabia. On top of all of that, there is this report Also from Tasnim News, the Yemeni army announced the attack on the Saudi ship in the Red Sea. This was published today. In a statement, the Yemeni army announced the attack on the coast of Al-Mukha. Al-Mukha is a Yemeni port city on the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. In this statement, it is stated, by the grace of God, the Yemeni armed forces were able to target a Saudi enemy military ship along with 4 accompanying military boats in the Red Sea on the shores of Al-Mukha with a number of ballistic missiles, which were accurately and directly hit. And this operation led to the complete burning of the ship, the sinking of a number of boats, and the burning of the rest. So you have attacks on Saudi shipping by Ansar Allah. You have attacks on land-based Saudi-backed mercenaries in Yemen by Ansar Allah, and you have attacks by Ansar Allah on key oil infrastructure in Saudi Arabia itself. Now, as you can imagine, all of this is rattling energy markets even more. And from the perspective of those who consume oil products, i.e. pretty much everybody on God's green earth, and who depend upon them, whether for good or ill, for normal day-to-day life and economic activity and essential services, the production of food and so forth. From that perspective, the way the oil markets are reacting is bad indeed. Here is the latest report from oilprice.com about the price of Brent crude. You can see that as of 1435 CDT today, an October contract for Brent crude was selling at almost very close to $91, a slight increase from the prior reporting period. And this is well above where it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the last time Trump claimed that the Iranians and the Trump regime were on the verge of a deal to open up the Strait of Hormuz, which was, of course, as we can now all see, and everybody knew at the time who was thinking sensibly, was a flagrant lie. Now, this is not only well above where it was 3 weeks ago, but actually when there was the most hopium, intoxicating the oil markets I think it was about 6 weeks ago, the price of Brent crude had actually gone down to the $65 or $66 level. It was in the 60s. It is now gradually but fairly briskly moving back up the escalation ladder, if I can put it that way. And I, at this point, am beginning to think that Trump has basically shot his wad in terms of manipulating the market. I'm not saying that he's incapable of manipulating the price of oil anymore, but I think we're into the law of diminishing returns when it comes to Trump's efforts to do that, which is to say that he will be expending more and more effort to manipulate the market with less and less of an impact because his credibility has been so destroyed. And I think correspondingly during this period, the credibility of the Iranian government, whether people take it seriously or not, that it says there are no negotiations going on, is going up because subsequent events prove it to be telling the truth and prove or suggest that Trump was lying. Now, not only that, but the price, and this may be of even greater concern, I think, to people all around the world, the price of gasoline and diesel are soaring. Let's start with gas prices. You'll see here a report published yesterday that U.S. gas prices reached the highest ever recorded for August, highest ever amid stalled talks with Iran. This is a report in The Guardian. U.S. gas prices were the highest ever recorded for August as peace talks between the U.S. and Iran stalled and Trump launched fresh threats against Oman. The national average price of gas was $4.06 per gallon on Monday. That's yesterday, according to data from the American Automotive Association, which was 5 cents higher than last week and $1 more expensive than a year ago. In California and Hawaii, averages hit about $5.50 a gallon. And for so many people around the United States, that is a very difficult development to contend with, because probably in excess of 50% of the American population, because of the depraved policies of both Republicans and Democrats are living basically one paycheck away from economic ruin. And so if they have to pay, $1,000, $500 to $1,000 more a year for gasoline and other products that are affected by the price of gasoline, which is pretty much what is happening now, that is the equivalent for them of one paycheck for a large swath of the American population. So that could plunge a lot of people into ruin. That's how many people in the United States are living on the edge because of the inhumane, elitist, and fanatically capitalist policies of the United States government. Now, it's not only gasoline that is problematic, probably even more problematic for people all around the world is what is happening in the diesel markets all over the corporate media in the West. There are reports today about the fact that the U.S. diesel crack has surpassed $100 a barrel for the first time ever. Record high crack spreads, serious economic ramifications. That's the subheading from investing.com. And they explain that the diesel crack spread is the pricing difference between a barrel of crude oil and the ultra low sulfur diesel refined from it. It represents the profit margin a refinery makes on producing diesel. So this is fantastic for refineries, particularly in the United States. I'll come back to that in a second. But it's disastrous for the global economy and for the vast majority of humanity because of the importance of diesel. And what does this article say about diesel? This is actually quoting a report by Reuters today. The U.S. diesel crack, a key measure of refining profitability, hit an all-time high of $102.20. It had never gone over 100, and now it's at $102.20 a barrel as global supply disruptions from the wars in Iran and Ukraine run into peak agricultural consumption season. Measured as the premium of U.S. diesel futures over U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude oil futures, the U.S. diesel crack was trading at $99.82 a barrel, up 2.4% from Friday. As of 11:56 a.m. Eastern Time, the crack has hit new intraday record highs in 5 of the last 6 sessions. It just keeps pushing and pushing and pushing the boundary, reflecting growing concerns about fuel availability as fresh attacks on Middle Eastern refineries added to existing supply disruptions. And in the final paragraph here up on the screen, it says this. This is the key part. The most immediate hit from surging diesel cracks is to farmers who need the fuel to power tractors, harvesters, and other equipment during the ongoing harvest season in the Northern Hemisphere and the planting season in the Southern Hemisphere. Longer term, it could hit most other sectors of the global economy. I repeat, most other sectors of the global economy, as the fuel has wide-ranging uses from manufacturing to heavy transportation and power generation in parts of the world. I mean, this thing is so fundamental to the health of the economy because even just, all those trucks you see on the highway transporting goods, essential goods, pharmaceutical products, food, and so forth, they run on diesel fuel. And if the price of their operations goes up dramatically, so too will the price that they charge to the companies, the producers who are engaging them to transport their goods to the markets. So this is something that is going to ripple through the economy. It's bad enough that the price of oil is going up, but the spread between the price of oil and diesel, a fundamental element of economic activity across the world, is soaring. And it's, as I said, at eye-watering levels at this stage. So, my friends, it is no exaggeration to say that we are hurtling towards an energy crisis cliff. And in my humble submission to you, now is as good a time as any for you to begin putting pressure on your governments, your elected officials, to do whatever your government can do to bring this war to an end as mercifully as possible before things get really out of hand, because we're not even close to the worst phase of this economic crisis. We are still in the early to middle stages, in my opinion. Now, before I close out, I wanted to share with you some other related news. The U.S. corporate media continues to report on the humiliating state of the U.S. military globally. This story might be of particular interest to you. A U.S. Navy destroyer, according to CNN yesterday, spent 4 days without power last month in the South China Sea. This Navy destroyer didn't have for that entire period air conditioning, and it was apparently in an area where there were sweltering hot temperatures, and the toilets weren't working, and apparently, they lost refrigeration, which created problems with feeding the military personnel on board. And apparently, the problem here is that there was a power failure on the vessel resulting from either poor design or wear and tear on the vessel. And this, of course, is on top of news that the USS Abraham Lincoln, an aircraft carrier near the Strait of Hormuz, perhaps in the Indian Ocean, the Sea of Oman, is becoming has become uninhabitable. And of course, there were these widely reported problems with the USS Gerald Ford in the Red Sea. They said the U.S. government, there was a laundry fire that took the USS Gerald Ford out of commission for several weeks. As I covered previously, it actually docked at the NATO naval base in Suda Bay in Crete, where I reported from a couple of months ago, because it was in such a state of disrepair and it needed to be taken out of action for some period of time. Whether, in fact, it was a laundry fire, who knows? But one thing is for sure, the demands upon the U.S. Navy, not just in Iran, not just in the Red Sea, not just in the Eastern Mediterranean, the South China Sea, but also in the Caribbean, with this suffocating blockade, this sadistic, satanic blockade they put on Cuba, the kidnapping of the president of Venezuela. This is having a hugely negative impact over time on the U.S. Navy, which admittedly is the largest and most powerful Navy in the world, at least was up until very recently. And this draws into question very seriously the ability of the U.S. military to sustain all of these naval operations, including the criminal blockade on Iranian ports. And there's more here, folks. There was an article published today in the Washington Post. I had a good chuckle when I saw this headline: Pentagon weighing smaller U.S. military presence in Gulf once Iran war ends. The analysis, which the Defense Department said was not yet a formal review, will address whether to rebuild strike-battered bases, said people familiar with the matter. So again, always these unnamed U.S. officials feeding information to the corporate media in the United States and other Western countries, which they uncritically repeat. They basically are just scribes of the U.S. government and other Western governments. What they're doing here, in my opinion, is they're prepping the public for the inevitable. And the inevitable is that the U.S. military is at a bare minimum going to have to dramatically reduce its military presence in the Persian Gulf. Probably has already done that. Certainly there are lots of credible reports that it has. But that this dramatic reduction is going to be permanent, because it simply can't defend these bases from Iran, the target of U.S. aggression. It has no choice. This article is kind of framing it as an option. The U.S. is weighing an option. The U.S. has no option. As I said, at a bare minimum, because of the vulnerability, the existential vulnerability of U.S. military bases in the Persian Gulf and even beyond, in Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Iraq, northern Iraq. The U.S. is simply, as a practical matter, going to have to dramatically scale back its presence there and perhaps withdraw altogether. So this article, I think, is a prepping of the public, preparing them for a dramatic announcement that it will come later, so that the impact of that announcement will be blunted. Now, of course, all of this is having very negative impacts on the financing of the U.S. government's operations. The U.S. 30-year Treasury bond just hit the highest level, the yield on it, the interest rate, since 2007, as war oil worries fester. And this article in Reuters says the Treasury yields rose to their highest level since 2000 on Tuesday, that's today, as stalled talks to end the U.S.-Iran war and worries of an imminent escalation sent oil prices over $90 a barrel. So it seems that this, all of this delusional thinking within the oil markets about peace breaking out imminently is gone. And now what they're primarily focused upon is the possibility of an imminent escalation. and the fact that the price of oil is going way back up and it just won't stop. And this is fanning fears of inflation and jolting markets. Remember, 2007, my friends, was the beginning of the great financial crisis. So the fact that the 30-year yield has gone to the highest level since that year should be something that concerns us all. Now, finally, I want to talk about Gaza, because today I saw an enraging report about this shyster war criminal, Jared Kushner. And Kushner went to the press after meeting with child murderer Benjamin Netanyahu and announced that the U.S. wasn't going to begin or allow or permit or authorize the reconstruction in Gaza until Hamas had been completely disarmed. Now, according to reports in the American media, Netanyahu brought to him with his meeting with Kushner, two Israeli opinion polls. This was a meeting that took place yesterday, and apparently the source for this information is Axios. Undoubtedly, it must be Barak Ravid, who is a former Israeli intelligence agent, who wrote this article. But it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because Axios is just a scribe for the U.S. and Israeli governments. One of these polls showed, according to this Axios report, that most Israelis oppose rebuilding Gaza before it is completely demilitarized. The other showed majority support continuing Israeli attacks on Palestinians in Gaza. By the way, I'm sure that those polls, if they in fact were shown to Kushner, are accurate. Most Israelis, the vast majority of Israeli Jews, I am sad to say, are genocidal maniacs. They are psychotic, child-murdering rapists. They support all of the atrocities that the Israeli government is doing with U.S. backing to the Palestinians, and a goodly proportion of the population, the Israeli Jewish population, thinks that the Israeli government is not being sadistic and satanic enough. But that's another matter. So apparently he brings these two polls, Netanyahu, to his meeting with Kushner, and Kushner told Netanyahu that Israel should take small steps to test whether Hamas will begin disarming. But he assured Netanyahu that Washington would not expect Israel to refrain from attacking alleged imminent threats, and that reconstruction would only begin after total demilitarization of Hamas. What qualifies, this is from DropSite now, what qualifies as an imminent threat remains a key dispute still to be settled between Israel and Trump's Board of Peace. A board official told Axios Israel has labeled preteen children playing outside their homes hundreds of meters from the so-called yellow line imminent threats. Toddlers, children, imminent threats. After shooting them dead, it has killed over 300 children since agreeing to this so-called ceasefire last October. That was about 10 months ago. That's one a day. One child a day it has killed during something that these lunatics call, these psychotic mass murderers call a ceasefire. And Israel invoked the same pretext for targeted assassination bombings of civil Hamas officials and policemen in their homes that wiped out officials with their entire families, as well as after shootings in which Palestinian women and children were struck and killed by Israeli soldiers opening fire to Gaza. So this is what Kushner, the emissary of Trump, is approving of, the continuation of this monstrosity, this absolutely Nazi-like behavior. And I can't even find the words to express my contempt and loathing of this character, Kushner, who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He was not elected by the American people for any purpose, for any office ever. He was never approved by the Senate, and yet he speaks for the Trump regime on the most consequential matters of our time, including this. He's all over the place. He's supposedly trying to help the other shyster war criminal, Steve Witkoff, bring an end to the Ukraine war. That's a lie. That war is of existential danger to us all because of the potential for nuclear conflagration. He's, dealing with the so-called Board of Peace, Kushner. He was assigned to deal with the Iranians, although it appears, understandably so, that the Iranians want nothing any more to do with Kushner or Witkoff and have accused them of personally profiting from inside information from the negotiations with Iran. I'm sure that that's true. In any case, the larger point here, whatever you may think of Kushner, and I suspect that there's nobody in our audience will have any affection for this man. The fact of the matter is this. If you're a sane and decent person, the first priority should not be to disarm the lightly armed resistance that exists amongst the population of persons being subjected to a genocide. People who have a conscience, who have a commitment to equality and fairness and justice, their priority would be first to disarm the perpetrators of the genocide. And they are armed to a far greater degree. They're not only perpetrators of genocide, their ability to inflict catastrophic damage on a civilian population and mass murder children is vastly greater than any damage that any of the resistance groups inside occupied Palestine can do. You have to be one fucked up motherfucker. Let me say that as clearly as I can. To think that the priority should be to take away the light weapons from the resistance groups in Palestine while leaving the perpetrator of genocide armed to the teeth, including with nuclear weapons. Again, I struggle to find the words to express my loathing and contempt for people who take that position. That's my report for today, my friends. By the way, I'm in Toronto today to deliver a speech this evening to comrades in the anti-imperialist community about the decline of the U.S. empire. If you watch my last report, you'll know that I was going to speak at a venue called the Free Time Cafe in downtown Toronto. But Zionist groups went apeshit when they heard that I was going to speak there, and they managed to pressure the owner of that cafe to cancel it. But now we're going to be speaking, we'll be gathering together at a place nearby, just a short walk away from Free Time Cafe, called Taco Taco on Augusta Avenue. And my speech will begin about 7 p.m. this evening. So if you happen to be in the Toronto area and close by, please do come and join us. In any case, we will be back to you tomorrow with more news about the unfolding events in West Asia. Signing off today from Toronto, Canada on August 18th, 2026.